Hello everyone and welcome to the virtual recording of the Milton Active Transportation Plan Second Public Workshop. My name is Paul Moser. I am a program manager with the Delaware Department of Transportation in the Active Transportation and Community Connection section. I'm joined also by our consultant Leah Casanda with Whitman Rencard Associates, and we will be talking today about the materials that were presented at the Milton Active Transportation Plan Second Public Workshop earlier in December. For those that have not been involved in the plan so far, there has been one public workshop previously in the year, as well as 2 meetings of the Transportation Advisory Group and a couple of focus meetings around town to help develop these recommendations. They are exactly that. They are recommendations. There is currently no funding ascribed to any of them, and they are up to the town and the people of the town of Milton whether or not to pursue them through any of the number of different transportation funding mechanisms out there. This plan is part of a broader effort that DelDOT is partaking in to help fund studies around towns, especially in Sussex County, to identify improvements that could make walking, bicycling, or using mobility devices safer and easier for people to get around for short trips, easier, more conveniently, and hopefully improve the economy and quality of life in the state of Delaware. Throughout this recording, we're going to review several of the presentation boards that were used at the public workshop, and we'll be going back and forth between myself and Leah to review them. If you have any questions, I would suggest that you reach out to me, Paul Moser, at DelDOT. I will have my email in some of the materials to contact. I'm always available to chat about the plan or any particular recommendations. So with that, thank you and enjoy. To start off every presentation at DelDOT, we review our mission and our goal, which is to provide excellence in transportation for every trip, every mode, every dollar, and every one. And as part of this, our section is dedicated to developing projects to make it safer, more convenient to walk, bike, or use small mobility devices to get around the state safer. So we are making true to our mission statement in this plan. In every presentation, we also review yearly fatality statistics year to date. For those that do not know, we have a serious traffic fatality problem in our country, and Delaware usually ranks in the top 5 worst for pedestrian fatalities per capita. As a part of this, there are many programs in DelDOT that fund projects specifically dedicated to making walking and biking safer and more convenient. And as you can see, we are tracking higher year-to-date pedestrian fatalities, as well as a number of other different fatality types. So when we are doing this work and talking about projects, we are very aware of the fact that they have very real implications on the safety and well-being of the state. This slide reviews the framework that we used for assessing bicycle conditions in the town of Milton. Future slides will focus on how we approach pedestrian infrastructure, but the framework that we used is called low stress bicycle network planning. And the idea is that every road has a certain level of traffic stress, which traffic stress relates to the perceived stress of bicycling or walking next to a high speed or a high volume of automobile traffic, and that certain people just do not tolerate traffic stress and either will seek out a lower stress road, for instance, one of the very nice, quiet local streets around Milton, or they will just not see it as feasible and choose to drive or take some other means for their trip. So the goal in this framework is to develop a connected network or grid of low stress streets, pathways that people can use to get around seamlessly if they're walking or biking. And in this case, that involves using lower volume side streets if possible and making sure that those are well connected. So rather than have to spend lots of money to make, for instance, Union Street lower stress by putting bike lanes or pathways or something expensive like that, this grid will focus on the lower volume streets where no improvements are really needed. And in that way, it can help reduce the cost of developing this bicycle network, as well as leverage the existing roadways that are already there and are perfectly suitable to bike on today, but make them more connected and safer. So what's shown here is a concept for a connected bicycle network throughout town. Each one of these colored lines will be addressed in future slides, and each one has a host of different recommendations for what could be done to make it better for bicycling or walking. And throughout each of these chords, different things are recommended. All these chords are not recommending pathways or bike paths or bike lanes. Quite the contrary, most of the recommendations are using existing roads and proposing very little, if any, changes. It is simply connecting those low volume, low stress roads more conveniently that makes them part of a useful connected network.
Thanks, Paul. My name's Leah Casanda, and Now we're going to walk through the specific recommendations along each of the chords.
This slide addresses the North-South Bikeway, which is a core component of this bicycle network concept. This particular component leverages Chestnut Street, the bridge across the Broadkill, as well as Behringer Avenue, and then connecting up to the shopping center north of 16, and then extending south down Harbison Road. So this is a relatively well-used route as is for people biking around town. It keeps you off of Union Street or Federal Street and allows you to get across the river safely and conveniently. Some of the proposals that we are going to focus on, going from south to north, on Harbison Road, obviously a high-speed rural road with quite a bit of traffic. The recommendation there is a shared use pathway or a separated pathway that connects to Chestnut Street. Going back to the first slide with our bikeway selection guide from the Federal Highway Administration, we're in the traffic and speed volume area where we are going to recommend a separated facility that is not sharing the road space with automobiles. Continuing north on Chestnut Street, starting at the bottom, we have a couple of different proposals for what could be done on Chestnut Street to improve it for bicycling. The first recommendation shown there is what are called advisory bike lanes, which is a treatment that is somewhat new to America at the moment. Essentially, where dashed lines are placed to create what are called advisory bike lanes. Essentially, there's no double yellow center line. This roadway configuration functions just like any other rural road or subdivision road with no center line, right? Vehicles can drive generally on their side of the road. However, if they approach someone who is bicycling or using a scooter or a wheelchair or something in the road, they will just pass around them when it is safe. There's no double yellow center line for them to cross. So if anything, it would operate the same way that Chestnut does north of Atlantic. However, there would be these advisory bike lanes to create some more perceptual space for people bicycling or using the road. The second alternative is a separated two-way bike lane, which is a proposal that was adopted from a grant application that came from the town about a year ago. This is a much more impactful recommendation. However, we wanted to include it in this plan just to acknowledge that future effort that was done. What this would do would provide a separated two-way bike lane in the southbound direction of travel. So southbound automobile traffic, that lane would be taken off. This road would be one way for automobile traffic going north into town, and there'd be a two-way separated bike lane from the Milton Rail Trail north to Front Street. That two-way protected bike lane could be used by EMS traffic to go south, theoretically. This is, again, quite an impactful improvement, but we did want to include it. And then a third alternative, which is mentioned in the slide but not shown in a picture, would be to just remove the double yellow center line. There's some studies that show that removing a double yellow center line will increase the distance by which automobiles pass people in the road walking or biking. It will reduce travel speeds a little bit and create a environment more like the north of Atlantic. If you think the north side of Chestnut that doesn't have double yellow center line, it has a much slower town feel to it than south of Atlantic. So removing the W center line would be a way to get that kind of feel and improve conditions for people bicycling, walking, or using the road for whatever else they're doing. Going north from there, we're proposing a connection from Chestnut Street directly to either the Governor's Walk or the bridge across the Broadkill. Really, all that does is just provide a more seamless and connected and safer route for people to cross the road once and then not have to deal with taking that jog to the left and then to the right to connect up to the bridge. A small improvement, but it could integrate with future improvements to that parcel to the northeast of here, which, to my knowledge, is probably going to become a park for the town of Milton soon. So, sort of double improvement there. And then headed north across there, as far as in-road improvements for bicycling, we're not proposing anything after you get across the bridge, simply riding through the parking lot and over to Behringer Street and then north on Behringer Street. We are proposing sidewalks on Behringer, or one sidewalk on one side of Behringer Street. Again, this is just a recommendation. Currently, people walk in the street on Behringer, and it doesn't seem to pose too much of a safety problem. However, it is something that might be considered if this is part of an overall connected thematic bicycling and walking route. It might make sense. Continuing north on Behringer, again, it would just be what we call a shared lane condition, where people biking just ride in the road until you get to Bay Avenue, where we are suggesting a connection from Bay Avenue that goes north into the Milton Cemetery and continue up to 16. This improvement would look something like any old cemetery road. Currently, the roads in the cemetery are open to the public to walk, bike, or use. And we have had initial conversations with the managers of the cemetery who might be open to the proposal in the future. And then continuing north, this would get to 16, which we would then propose a median crossing island, which is essentially a concrete island in the middle of the road that separates the two lanes of traffic, so people walking or biking could cross one direction of traffic and they'll be in a safe median refuge island. They can cross the other lane of traffic when it is safe, and then continuing north out of town. So this proposal really is a key component for having a low stress north-south corridor through town for walking and biking. Again, you'll see there's really only a couple locations where there are proposals for new infrastructure. It's largely using the existing roads. And in the case of Chestnut, between Harbison and Front Street, there are three different alternatives ranging from very low impact to very high impact. By the end of the plan, we'll probably propose one of them, but at the end of the day, it's up to the town to choose to move forward on one of these.
Next, we're going to review two of the east-west routes on the proposed network map. The northern route, shown on the top part of this board in yellow, we're calling the Cemetery Connector. It features the use of Shipbuilders Boulevard and then kind of continues to the east through Milton Cemetery before jogging slightly to the north and connecting over towards Cypress Village. The western part of this connection along Shipbuilders Boulevard itself, the road is wide enough to allow for striping on-road bike lanes, and sidewalk could also be included along that section of road. For the middle part of that connector, kind of between Shipbuilders Boulevard and the cemetery, the road is pretty low stress already, so it would just need sharrows for wayfinding guidance. The project team did meet with the folks who operate the Milton Cemetery, and currently a number of people already walk and bike through the cemetery, and there's actually a dirt path in the back end of the cemetery where people can cut through and access the cemetery. And although future coordination would be required, the cemetery is open to continuing that conversation, but it will require future conversations with them to advance something like this. And then similarly, continuing to the east, similar conversations would be necessary to tie in to the Cypress Village community. But a connection here would allow folks from the rest of Milton to get into Cypress Village and the new amenities there. I know recently some new businesses have been proposed at that development site, and this would provide a connection for people on foot and by bike that would not require going all the way out to 16 to get into that site. The Atlantic Avenue family-friendly street, the western portion of that, as shown on the left there, would be a shared use path adjacent to HOB Elementary School that would connect over to Mulberry Street. And from there, between Mulberry and Union, would need some conversations. That also would kind of depend on the future development of that parcel and coordinating with some property owners. Alternately, that route could extend down a little further and kind of wiggle over on other local streets, but then would continue east on Atlantic Avenue. Atlantic Avenue is a low-speed, low-volume residential street, so designated bike facilities would not be necessary beyond marking Sharrow pavement markings. And again, those pavement markings are really only appropriate when speeds and volumes are low and really function as wayfinding guidance for people biking. Also looking at the possibility of including sidewalk on one or both sides of Atlantic Avenue, but that would require further coordination with the town and property owners around what level of sidewalk improvement could be funded for those improvements.
This slide presents the Lavinia Street shared use pathway and Broadkill Bikeway, which is a east-west component of this low-stress bicycle network grid that will connect the future location of the Granary, Wagamin's Shores West, to the downtown area, and in the future, if development ever occurs, over there towards the west, over to the Milton Little League. So starting from the western side, we are proposing a shared use pathway, which was previously studied by the town of Milton, and they developed an engineering concept with Verdantis engineers for what a separated pathway would look like for people both walking and bicycling across the Wagamin's Pond. As you all probably know, it gets very tight by Mulberry and Lavinia Street, and we're not proposing to fit a pathway through there. So the pathway would terminate about where the sign shop is. There'd be a crossing, and people bicycling or walking would just walk or bike in the roadway down Carey Street, and then connecting over to Magnolia Street. Still in the roadway in this case, there's a low volume and a low speed of automobile traffic, so it's relatively safe, and there are sidewalks on that portion of Magnolia. Connecting a potential connection over by the library, which you'll see there, it joins the north-south bikeway for that section by the park and the boat ramp. Over towards the east, and that last connection shown in the dotted black lines near Chandler Street is mostly a proposal if future development ever occurs in that parcel to then make sure a connection is made over to the Milton Little League area so there is a nice east-west corridor. However, nope, if there is no development, that is just a conceptual recommendation.
This board shows potential improvements in the downtown area as well as along Front Street and extension of the Milton Rail Trail. So we'll start with the downtown improvements. So if you look at the upper left part of this board, you'll see a number of pedestrian improvements to downtown that are also intended to calm motor vehicle traffic. So that includes some curb bump outs, a new crosswalk, and all of these things are really intended to cause cars to travel slowly while traveling through downtown, respecting the fact that there's a lot of people walking and accessing local businesses, supporting local businesses in that space, and hopefully also discouraging through traffic that does not need to be cutting through the heart of Milton. Moving a little bit to the east, you'll see a line along Front Street that continues out to Cave Neck Road vicinity. As you know, right now, portions of Front Street do have a sidewalk. In order to safely accommodate bikes, we are showing two options. One is a widening of that sidewalk to a shared use path standard of 10 feet. And the other option is on-road bike lanes with a sidewalk. As many of you also know, Front Street currently is experiencing issues with flooding. So any future assessment of what could be installed on this to connect the downtown area east towards Cave Neck Road would require coordination with LDOT's resiliency section around the potential raising of this roadway. And at that point in time, concept design could explore which side of the road a pathway or sidewalk could or should be on, and get into a greater level of detail regarding that. that connection on Front Street and on the rail trail to that Cave Neck Road intersection is also critical to a potential future connection south towards the Georgetown Lewis Trail, which Paul will share a little bit more about once I finish presenting on this board. So looking at that light blue line on the bottom part of your screen, part of this is already done, right? The Milton Rail Trail is there between Lavinia Street and Chestnut Street, and it functions very well. A lot of folks use it. So we are proposing to continue that facility to the west out towards Ellendale and also to the east through some of the commercial areas in kind of between Cannery Village and Dogfish Head Brewery and Chestnut Street, and then continue via Off-Centered Way east to tie into Cave Neck Road. Through the Dogfish Head campus, you see that center section on the bottom there. We could provide a shared use path or the Sharrow markings, and then it would be just kind of a shared use path off the side of the road along Off-Centered Way. And also shown there on the lower right is a potential typical section for Cave Neck Road, which again would be a side path off the existing road edge.
Another component of this plan is the potential connection to the Georgetown to Lewis Trail from Milton, which has been talked about quite a bit in early public workshops and feedback that we received. So this was a study that was commissioned by I.G. Burton, as well as the Freeman Development Group and a couple of other interested stakeholders who wanted to develop a concept for connecting Milton to the Georgetown to Lewis Trail. So from that study, they developed 2 preliminary recommendations, of which we plan to, over the next few months, review in more detail to assess the social, environmental, and feasibility impacts of these 2 alignments, and then perhaps work with the groups that developed the study to decide on one to move forward with. And if we find concurrence, perhaps use that as the preferred alternative for a connector to the Georgetown to Lewis Trail. Given the development that's occurring at the Cool Spring area, this is a good opportunity to leverage existing private development funds and maybe make this connection happen in a relatively short timeline. So if you are interested in talking more about this, please reach out to me and we can make sure that you are a part of that conversation. And we'll probably host 1 or 2 small public events in the future to review this topic in particular.
Our final board shows some ideas for small connections in the southern part of town, as well as highlighting some locations for potential roundabout improvements. So I'll start with the small connections. Right now, the neighborhood to the south of Mariner Middle School, Heritage Creek, is not connected to Cannery Village or Mariner Middle School. So you'll see kind of 2 purple lines there, one a westward connection over to the middle school and one a northern connection already owned by the town into the Cannery Creek neighborhood. So both of these would be shared use, 10-foot wide shared use paths, and basically would be an opportunity for folks who live in the Heritage Creek neighborhood and those also north to connect into the middle school and also travel freely between town and the neighborhood without having to travel on Harbison Road. This would keep people a little bit safer and provide a nicer low stress connection. Could get up and easily over to the rail trail and walk and bike safely instead of traveling on the high speed, high volume roadway. Also, you'll see 2 blue icons on this map, which indicate potential roundabout locations. The southern location has already been proposed by DelDOT to have a roundabout recently. As you likely know, always stop was implemented in this location due to safety concerns. And in future, there are plans to update that to a full roundabout. On the left side of the screen there, you see some details about why DelDOT has been incorporating roundabouts where they work, and that's primarily for safety reasons. A traditional intersection has 32 vehicle conflict points, so each of those red dots you see there are opportunities for a crash to occur. And each of the black dots you see are opportunities for a pedestrian or crash to occur. So that's 24 on the left diagram there. When you switch to a roundabout, those conflict points drastically reduce. The vehicular conflict points go from 32 to 8, and the pedestrian conflict points go from 24 to 8. And also the types of crashes that occur in roundabouts are much less severe. At a traditional four-way intersection, you can get into a T-bone crash or a head-on collision, as opposed to a roundabout. Even when crashes occur, they're much more likely to be side swipes that do not result in serious injury or loss of life. So that is the major reason DelDOT is moving to roundabouts where there is space for them. There are also often operational benefits to roundabouts. So instead of having to come to a complete stop, often traffic can kind of keep flowing at a steady pace. And lastly, roundabouts cause cars to slow down. So the northern roundabout location at Sand Hill Road and Harbison Road is intended really to serve as kind of a gateway into Milton that makes sure that cars heading north really are slowing down before entering town limits, and especially approaching the crosswalk of the Milton Rail Trail.
So thank you all for taking the time to listen to this virtual presentation. Myself, Paul Moser, and Lee are available at any time to discuss any of these recommendations or the plan itself. We encourage you all to fill out the public survey on public input, which we'll post a link to. And I also encourage you to email me if you want to discuss anything, or if you're unclear or you're uncertain about anything. As I said earlier, these are just recommendations for a planning study. None of these projects are tied to funding at the moment. None of them are in the project development process. It is simply to develop an aspirational set of projects that can then be used to apply for grant funding, a few of the state programs geared towards walking and bicycling, or as maintenance activities occur, build the roadways or the infrastructure in a way that is supportive of this plan and supportive of a connected network where people can bike and walk around town safely and seamlessly. So again, please be in touch if you have any questions. It was a pleasure presenting this to you. Thank you.